Hello everyone, welcome to the Chinese Culture Insight channel. Today, we continue to explore the classic work, Zhuangzi, by the Daoist sage Zhuangzi, specifically the second chapter of the inner chapters, Qi Wu Luan. The Chinese scholar Wen Yidua once said that every Chinese person bears the imprint of a single individual in their culture, and that person is Zhuangzi. People like to call Confucius a sage, and Zhuangzi a divine man. Why is that? In Zhuangzi's own words, he moves in unison with the Creator above, and regards the cycle of life and death as endless below, uniquely interacting with the spirit of heaven and earth. To us ordinary people, the Creator seems unattainable, too sacred to look at directly or to speculate about. Yet Zhuangzi is like holding the hand of the Creator, watching the sunset together, taking walks, and sharing laughter and conversation. Zhuangzi's unparalleled stature, unmatched by any before or after, is particularly evident in the second chapter of the inner chapters, Qi Wu Luan. This chapter is also the most misinterpreted by the world. Many believe that Qi Wu Luan refers to the art of social equality, to embrace all rivers and tolerate others. In the ancient Chinese cultivation system, when a person is in harmony with heaven, they become a sage or a true person. This state of harmony with heaven is called mysterious unity by Laozi and lifting the heavens by the emperor. In Zhuangzi, it is called Qi Wu, which means the same great way, living together with heaven and earth, and considering all things as one. What does it mean for all things to be one? In Daoist thought, the Tao is the first cause, and the universe is the child of the Tao's interpretation. Modern scientific discoveries show that the universe is expanding, indicating that this super life form is still growing like a child. All the galaxies and things in the universe are the organs and cells of this life form, all part of this life, just different in scale, but structurally isomorphic. To illustrate the idea of the isomorphism of all things, Zhuangzi used three words, universal, all-encompassing, and harmonious, to describe this principle. Universal means that in the endless spatial scale, all things are an extension of the universe's body. All-encompassing means that in the endless life cycle, the life of all things is part of the universe's life. Harmonious means all and everyone, meaning that in the endless evolution, all things reflect a part of the spirit of the universe. Only by understanding the oneness of all things can we understand the idea of the unity of heaven and man, and understand the content expressed by Zhuangzi in Qi Wu Luan. During the spring and autumn and warring states periods, Laozi, Zhuangzi, Confucius, Mencius, Confucians, Mahists, legalists, military strategists, and diplomats all stood on their own understood positions, affirming what the other denied, and denying what the other affirmed. For 100 years, this debate has never stopped, but the chess game of the world has become more chaotic. Why is that? At the beginning of Qi Wu Luan, Zhuangzi tells a story. A man named Zhuangzi sits on the embankment as if his consciousness has left his body. One of his disciples, Ziyu, is beside him and asks, "What's going on?" The body can indeed be as still as a piece of wood, but how can the heart be like dead ashes? The state you are in today while sitting in meditation seems different from before. Zhuangzi said, "Good question." He said, "I have lost myself." What does it mean to have lost oneself? Zhuangzi did not explain directly, but changed the subject. Have you heard of the sounds of man, Ren Lai, and the sounds of the earth, Di Lai, but you have not heard of the sounds of heaven, Tian Lai? Lai means sound. The sounds of man, the sounds of the earth, and the sounds of heaven represent three different kinds of sounds. The disciple was puzzled. What does this have to do with losing oneself? Zhuangzi continued, the breath of the earth is called the wind. Once it starts, various caves and holes in the world will make different sounds. In the dangerous and winding mountains and forests, on the great trees, those holes of various shapes, some are like mouths, noses, ears, some are like mortars, cup mouths, some are like mud pits, ponds. The sounds they make, some are like the sound of rapids, some are like the sound of arrows, some are like breathing, some are like wailing. The sounds of these holes change with the strength of the wind, and after the wind stops, all sounds are silent. After hearing Zhuangzi's words, Ziyu said, "The sound of man is the sound of people playing musical instruments, the sound of the earth is the sound of the wind blowing through holes. What is the sound of heaven?" Zhuangzi still did not answer directly, but said a meaningful sentence, "Who makes them make different sounds? It is they themselves." So far, Zhuangzi has ended the dialogue between the master and the disciple, leaving a series of seemingly unresolved questions. What does it mean to have lost myself? What is the sound of heaven? What is the relationship between the two? In fact, the answer is hidden in the dialogue. Musical instruments have no sound by themselves, people play them with certain purposes, and thus they produce different sounds, which is the sound of man. The wind has no sound by itself. It is because of the different shapes of the holes that different sounds are produced, which is the sound of the earth. If there is no subjective will of people, no different shapes of holes, then it will fall into a state of natural silence, and the sound of heaven will appear. Zhuangzi uses this to illustrate that different people often have different views on the same thing, which leads to fierce debates. These debates, some are utilitarian performances, just like the sound of man, some are non-utilitarian, simply expressing their own views and judgments, just like the sound of the earth caused by the wind. And when people enter the state of, I have lost myself, they will hear the silent sound of heaven. During the spring and autumn and warring states periods, there were many schools of thought, each standing on their own positions, arguing incessantly. Zhuangzi observed coldly and said, some people are petty and cannot tolerate others' words, some people secretly spy and like to find fault with others, some people are fierce and want to kill others, some people are talkative and incoherent. These people not only argue with the outside world during the day, but also argue with people in their dreams at night, and only after waking up do they know it was a dream. They usually hide their true selves, and when they are worried, they are uneasy, and when they are afraid, they are panicked. When they attack others right and wrong, they are like a fast sword leaving the string. When they wait for the opportunity, they are silent, as if they have taken a vow of silence. Even when they are old and weak, close to death, they are still addicted to arguing. Just like being tied up by a rope, still confused. Their joys and sorrows, their worries and regrets, hesitations and attachments, their frivolity, indulgence, extravagance, and affectation, are like the sounds made by the wind blowing through holes, the fungi produced by the evaporation of moisture, appearing day and night, but they do not know the source. Zhuangzi's words are a depiction of the self in I have lost myself. Next, Zhuangzi said, it is not that there is no self in them, but that there is no self in me. If there were no such emotions, there would be no self. Without that self, there would be no need for these emotions. The world regards me as the true master, trying every means to satisfy him. However, whether satisfied or not, the true nature of life is slowly being damaged, every day interacting with external things, cutting and grinding, rushing towards the end of life, nothing can stop it. Is this not sad? A lifetime of busyness without success, exhausted and without a destination, is this not sad? After the death of the body, the heart of material desire also disappears. Is this not the greatest tragedy? Are all people in the world so confused? Or is it only me who is confused? Zhuangzi believes that Confucian benevolence and righteousness, legalist punishment and reputation, Mahist universal love, all the various schools, are just holes of different shapes. After the wind blows, different sounds are produced. Standing from the perspective of human nature, those who like mountains will think that the sound of the pine waves is the most beautiful, while those who like the sea breeze will think that the waves hitting the shore are the most pleasant to listen to. Good and bad, right and wrong, glory and disgrace, success and failure, all disputes arise from the people's own preconceived notions. So what is the preconceived notion? Zhuangzi believes that people originally have a true heart, due to the influence of external things and the limitations of the five senses such as ears, eyes, and mouth, gradually have their own selfishness, their own emotions, their own prejudices. The selfishness and prejudice are in the chest, unbreakable, thus causing endless stubbornness, prejudice, and disputes. Everyone implements a standard, and there will never be a standard. Only when all people in the world forget the so-called standards that they have preconceived or adhered to for a long time, will the world be peaceful. He said, if you use the preconceived notion as the standard to measure right and wrong, everyone's standard is different. Whether it is a wise man, an ordinary person, or a fool, they will have their own standards. So there are disputes among the various schools such as Confucianism and Moism, each denying what the other affirms, affirming what the other denies. However, the two opposing aspects of things are interdependent, transform into each other, coexist and die together, and are inseparable. Looking from one side, you cannot see the other side, and vice versa. The sage views things transcending subjective prejudices and does not oppose things, but restores their original appearance, the perspective of not opposing each other, which is called the center of the Great Way. Standing inside is like being in the middle of a ring, which can adapt to infinite changes. In this way, no matter the thumb or the index finger, they are all fingers. White horses and black horses are all horses, and there is no need for debate. Looking at the world, all things come from the same source and are all manifestations of the Great Way. So, heaven and earth are one finger, all things are one horse. Destruction is formation, and formation is destruction, and there is no distinction between destruction and formation of all things. Cutting down a tree to build a house, the house is built, but the tree is destroyed. However, in essence, they are still things. People who understand these truths will treat things with a normal and natural attitude. people who do not understand these truths will exhaust their minds and argue with others, which is called 3 in the morning and 4 in the evening. What is 3 in the morning and 4 in the evening? When feeding the monkeys, the monkey keeper said to the monkeys, 3 in the morning, 4 in the evening, and the monkeys were very dissatisfied. So the monkey keeper changed his words, then 4 in the morning, 3 in the evening. The monkeys were very happy after hearing this. The same thing, the same amount, but the monkeys' joy and anger were different. The same thing, the world is due to subjective prejudices and has made a distinction. In ancient times, people's understanding of things had 3 realms. The highest realm did not have the concept of things at all. The next realm, although there was the concept of things, there was no boundary between things. The next level of realm, there were boundaries between things, but there was no judgment of good and bad, high and low, beautiful and ugly. After the judgment of right and wrong appeared, the great way in people's hearts was already damaged. The reason for the damage is due to selfish desires and preferences, just like Zhuangzi playing the zither. He played the sound he wanted to play according to his own emotional preferences, and other sounds were damaged. For example, if Zhuangzi does not play the zither, all sounds are still preserved, which is the sound of the soundless sound of heaven. Zhuangzi is good at playing the zither, Shikuang is good at politics, and Huizi is good at debating. From the perspective of the secular world, they have achieved a lot, but this achievement comes from preferences. Preferences cannot be imposed on others, just like Huizi debating with people. If others do not agree, they have to agree, so they are still confused until death. For example, Zhuangzi passed on his zither skills to his son. But his son did not have this hobby, so he was unsuccessful in his lifetime. Speaking of this, Zhuangzi seems to realize that he also has the suspicion of making a mistake in the argument, so he teases, "What I said today, is it the same as other arguers? Whether it is or not, people think it is. Although so, I still have to say it." He said, "Before the concept of time existed, time had already existed. Before this time began, there was a time without a beginning. Before the concept of having and not having appeared, there was already a non-existence. Before the non-existence began to exist, there was a non-existence without a beginning. Suddenly, having and not having were born, and people thought that having and not having were indeed having and not having." This sounds a bit confusing. Simply put, everything is born from the endless and endless nothingness, including all the concepts of the human world. Zhuangzi says, 天下莫大于秋毫之末，而大商为孝，莫寿于商子，而彭祖为妖. That's mean all things come from the same source and are one. From the perspective of the endless, boundless great way, there is no difference between the hare and Mount Tai, the child who died young and the 800-year-old Pingzu. It is the so-called heaven and earth and I are born together, and all things and I are one. The great way cannot be spoken. Once there is speech, it is not the great way itself, and it will lead to endless disputes. The great way is only 1 plus speech has become 2, and behind the speech plus speech has become 3, and so on, it will be out of control. Therefore, the affairs outside the universe, the sage only exists in the heart and does not state. The affairs inside the universe, the sage only states the facts and does not analyze. The words and deeds of the ancient kings, the sage only analyzes the reasons and does not comment on the right and wrong. People distinguish and argue, but the sage does not do so. Why? Because the sage uses a broad mind to contain everything, and people show themselves through argumentation. It is too obvious to be the great way, and there is something that is not seen in the debate. It is not everywhere to be benevolent, too clean is not true, and violence is not brave. Being in the ring of these 5, it is close to the great way. If a person can stop at what he does not know, it is the highest realm. If a person knows the argument of silence and the way of not speaking, then his mind is a gift. No matter how much is poured in, it will not be full. No matter how much flows out, it will not dry up, but I do not know the source. This is called Bao Guang, the light that is not revealed. Next, Zhuangzi shows us another dialogue. Nieke asked Wang and I, "Do all things have a commonality?" Wang and I said, "How do I know?" "Do you know the reason why you don't know?" "How do I know?" "Then we can't understand all things?" "How do I know?" Although so, I will still talk about it. How do I know what I call knowing is not knowing? How do I know what I call not knowing is not knowing? I ask you, if a person sleeps in a damp place for a long time, the waist will be sick, and even hemiplegia, will the loach also? If a person stays in a tree, he will be afraid, will the monkey also? Who is the standard for judging comfort between people, loaches, and monkeys? People eat livestock meat, elk eat beautiful grass, centipedes eat small snakes, owls eat mice. Who is the standard for judging delicious food? Elms and deer mate, loaches live with fish, Mao Chang and Li Ji are the beauties in the eyes of people, but fish see them and quickly hide in the water, birds see them and quickly fly away, deer see them and run away. Who is the standard for judging beauty? In my view, benevolence, morality, right and wrong, are chaotic. How can I distinguish clearly? Nieke said after listening, you don't understand the world's advantages and disadvantages, do the wise also not understand? Wang and I replied, the ultimate person is too magical, the forest burns by itself, he does not feel hot, the river is frozen, he does not feel cold, even if the thunder splits the mountain, the hurricane comes first, the ultimate person is still indifferent. Such a person can ride the cloud air, drive the flying dragon to travel outside the four seas, the change of life and death, still can't have the slightest impact on nature, let alone advantages and disadvantages. In this dialogue, Zhuangzi uses the most basic survival needs as an example to illustrate that all things have no common standard, and the disputes between people are also the same. Wang and I points to the realm he does not know and adopts the attitude of discussing without discussing, which is what Zhuangzi advocates, while Nieke is the opposite, he must come to a judgment of right and wrong, just like all the mistaken arguers. Later, Zhuangzi used the method of selflessness to lead to the discussion of life and death, thinking that if a person can be selfless, even life and death can be treated calmly, let alone right and wrong and advantages and disadvantages. So below, Zhuangzi elaborated on his own view of life and death, saying, how do I know that greed for life is not the confusion of the world? How do I know that the fear of death is not like a child who has been lost since childhood, not knowing how to go home? Aidsli Ji married Jin Shigong of Jin, and at the beginning, she cried and was reluctant to give up her hometown. When she arrived at the palace of Jin Shigong, she enjoyed the delicacies every day, sleeping on a comfortable and luxurious big bed, and she regretted crying at first. How do I know that people will not regret being greedy for life after death? In Zhuangzi's view, life and death are like dreams and wakefulness, and it is impossible to determine which is a dream and which is wakefulness. He said, people who drink and have fun in their dreams may wake up and cry, people who cry in their dreams may wake up and go hunting happily. People in the dream do not know that it is a dream and regard the dream as reality. Sometimes people even dream that they are dreaming, and even ask people to divine the good and bad of the dream, until they wake up to know that it is a dream. Only those who are truly enlightened understand that life is just a big dream, and those who are foolish think they are awake and think they understand everything. I say these words, how can it not be a dream? My words are very strange, maybe only the great sage after all things can understand. If I argue with people, is the winner necessarily right? Is the loser necessarily wrong? Who will judge? If the judge agrees with one party, how can he judge? If the judge disagrees with both parties, what does he judge with? Yes, contains no, but contains not so. If things only have an absolute side, why debate? Resolve the opposing voices, measure all things with the natural balance, and you can enjoy the natural life. Forget life and death and right and wrong, roam in the realm of nothingness, and you can be in the realm of freedom. Next, Zhuangzi through the dialogue between the shadow and the shadow, proposed that the shadow depends on the body, and the body of all things depends on whom? The implication is that all things are just the shadow of the Great Way. All things are shadows, and they can be integrated into one. From this, the butterfly dream that has been passed down for thousands of years was introduced. Once upon a time, Zhuangzi dreamed that he became a butterfly, dancing freely in the air. He felt that this was the realm he yearned for deep in his heart, so he felt that he was a butterfly, completely forgetting that he was Zhuangzi. When he woke up from the dream, he was surprised to find that he was Zhuangzi. At this moment, Zhuangzi was in a state of illusion, not knowing whether Zhuangzi dreamed of the butterfly or the butterfly dreamed of Zhuangzi. He said, although Zhuangzi and the butterfly are different, this is because all things can be transformed into one. At the end of the mistaken argument, Zhuangzi built a dream of butterflies for himself, forgetting the self and transcending the right and wrong of life and death, which perfectly echoes the realm of I Have Lost Myself by Nangu Ziki at the beginning. Looking at the first chapter of Xiaoyu and Kiwulan, we can find that in Zhuangzi's eyes, the world is a rich and vibrant ecological world. The animals and plants he depicted are dazzling, from the kuanpeng that needs 50 old oxen to catch, to the morning mushrooms that don't know the dark and bright, and the cicadas that don't know spring and autumn. There are sea turtles in the sea, strange birds in the air, ancient dakins in the mountains, scattered trees in the mountains, and oak trees that can also enter dreams. According to Mr. Lu Jiqing's research, there are a total of 22 kinds of flying birds, 15 kinds of aquatic creatures, 32 kinds of terrestrial creatures, 37 kinds of plants, and 32 kinds of inanimate objects in the book Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi has long realized that the colorful life state is the extension state of all things in the universe, and people cannot impose their own standards on others. Why does Zhuangzi think so? In fact, Zhuangzi said in Zaiyayu, wild horses, dust, the meaning of life, and the breath of each other. The formation of all things is the process of the evolution of the qi between heaven and earth. Qi, when gathered, forms, and the breath is like dust returning to the land. The metaphor of dust is the same as the metaphor of water in Laozi's Tao Te Ching. He believes that the formation of all things is just like the various phenomena formed by water in nature. There are continuous streams of streams, surging waves, and snowy snow in the ice and snow. These are all the processes of the evolution of heaven and earth, and in essence, they are all water, and there is no difference. So in Zhuangzi's view, we sure argued with people for a lifetime, just like arguing about the difference between streams, waves, and ice and snow, which is ridiculous. Confucians, legalists, military strategists, and Mahists have been arguing for thousands of years, just like arguing about the white horse being not a horse, which is boring, and the monkeys of 3 in the morning and 4 in the evening are pitiful. Because when we elevate the world to the dimension of Tao, all things in the world are the process of the evolution of the two qi of yin and yang. The waves rise as flowers, and the waves fall and cover the water. From the perspective of Tao, the child who died before birth and Pingzhu are the same, she sure and the ugly woman are the same, he and this are the same, they are all the process of the evolution of heaven and earth, and there is no essential difference. So Zhuangzi's Qiwulan emphasizes, I have lost myself, which is to forget the shape of the stream, the tide, and the ice and snow, and restore the essence of water. In this way, the stream can also evolve into a tide, and the ice and snow can also melt into a river, praying for human nature's obsession with wealth in the great way. Zhuangzi can also be a butterfly, and the butterfly can also be Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi's Qiwulan can be understood as a Taoist self-cultivation technique for longevity, or it can be understood as a long-term stable governance method. His applicable objects are not only people but also the universal laws of life and death of all things. Treating the body as the world and the world as the body, the principles are the same. Zhuangzi's Qiwulan is like an old man standing on the mountain top, seeing the scenery at a high place, tirelessly telling us these descendants who have been wandering at the foot of the mountain for a long time, complacent, self-righteous, and stubborn, how beautiful the scenery at the top of the mountain is. But how can we, the frogs at the bottom of the well who have been precipitated and imprisoned by obsession, believe that there is an infinitely vast sky beyond the sky? However, Zhuangzi is not concerned about explaining to us. He just tells us the original insights and insights he saw and understood at the top of the mountain with the compassion and care of a wise man. Whether we listen or not, believe or not, he doesn't care, because even if everyone has the ambition of Kunpeng, how many people can reach that realm? Standing at the latitude of Tao, looking at the small birds flying back and forth on the big branches and in the mountains, is also a kind of happiness. The significance of learning Qiwulan lies in how we accept such teachings and enlightenment, which means we accept a transcendence of our own cognitive limits, and thus stand at a higher dimension to bloom our possibilities. The significance of learning Qiwulan lies in that we accept such teachings and enlightenment, which means we accept a transcendence of our own cognitive limits, and thus stand at a higher dimension to bloom our possibilities. Thank you for listening. In the next episode, we will explore the concept of Yang Xingzhu in the inner chapters, its philosophical ideas. If you like us, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to China Culture Insider, and click the little bell to get our latest videos promptly. See you next time.